I had always loved secluded cabins. There's something peaceful about being completely alone in the woods, until it isn't. When I found a rustic lodge deep in the White Mountains, I couldn't resist booking a weekend. The caretaker, an old man named Frank, handed me the keys and muttered, "Stay inside after dark. Don't listen to the woods." I laughed it off, thinking it was just a lodge tradition to scare tourists. The first night was quiet, almost unnaturally so. I sat by the fireplace with a book, the wind whistling outside. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a soft scratching at my window. I thought it was a branch brushing against the glass, but then I heard it. Faint whispers. Like a dozen people murmuring just beyond the tree line. My heart thumped. I leaned closer to the window, straining to hear. Words formed slowly in the shadows. Don't sleep. Don't sleep. My pulse raced. I stepped back, telling myself it was the wind, but the whispers grew louder, echoing in the cabin. And then I realized they weren't coming from outside. They were coming from inside me. My own reflection in the window stared back at me, mouthing the same words. Panicking, I grabbed a flashlight and ran outside. The forest was dead silent. The shadows seemed to stretch, reaching toward me, but nothing was there. That's when I noticed faint footprints in the snow. My footprints, but they weren't mine. They moved toward the trees and vanished. I bolted back inside, locked the door, and huddled by the fire, trying to convince myself it was a dream. When morning came, Frank was there. Shaking his head, he whispered, "You heard them, didn't you?" I nodded silently. He murmured, "No one who hears them sleeps again. Not here, not ever." I left the lodge that morning, but the whispers didn't leave me. Even now, when I'm alone at night, I swear I can hear them. Soft, insistent, warning me to stay awake. A couple of years ago, I worked as the night manager at a small mountain lodge. It was the kind of place that only had about 15 rooms, mostly used by hikers and people passing through on road trips. Nothing fancy, just wood paneling, creaky floors, and a big stone fireplace in the lobby. Because we were so remote, I usually worked alone at night. Most evenings were quiet. I check in the occasional late guest, watch the security cameras, maybe read a book behind the desk until morning. One night in October, though, something happened that still bothers me. It was around 11:30 p.m. I had just finished locking the front doors when I saw someone walking up the long, gravel path toward the lodge. That wasn't unusual by itself. Sometimes people arrived late. But what caught my attention was how slow they were moving. Just steady, almost stiff. Through the glass doors, I could see it was a woman wearing a dark coat. Her hair was hanging down in front of her face, and she was dragging a small suitcase behind her. When she reached the door, I unlocked it and let her in. She didn't say hello. She just stood there in the entrance, dripping rainwater onto the floor. I asked if she needed a room. She nodded. Her voice was quiet when she finally spoke. Just for the night. I asked for her name and ID like usual. She hesitated for a few seconds before answering, Emily. Just Emily, no last name. I figured maybe she was just tired from travelling. I told her I'd need an ID to check her in, but she just stared at the desk. Not at me, at the surface of the desk. After about 10 seconds, she slowly shook her head. I don't have it with me. Normally that would be a hard no, but the weather was awful outside and we had empty rooms. I figured I'd make an exception, so I checked her into room 6. She didn't ask where it was, didn't ask for Wi-Fi, didn't even ask for the key. She just stood there again. Eventually, I slid the key across the counter and pointed down the hallway, second door on the left. She picked up the key and walked away without another word. That should have been the end of it. But about 40 minutes later, the phone at the front desk rang. It was room 6. I answered with the usual greeting, but no response, just silence. Then, after maybe 5 seconds, I heard breathing. Not like someone out of breath, just slow, steady breathing. I said hello again, but there was still nothing. Then the line went dead. I assumed it was a prank or maybe she fell asleep while dialing, but 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. Room 6. This time when I answered, I heard something else. A faint tapping sound, like someone lightly knocking on wood, and the breathing again. I asked if everything was okay. The tapping stopped immediately. Then the call disconnected. Now I was getting annoyed more than anything, so I grabbed the spare key and walked down the hallway to room 6. The lodge was completely silent. No TV, no footsteps, nothing. I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I knocked again and said, "Front desk." Still nothing. So I unlocked the door. The room was empty. The bed untouched, bathroom lights off, suitcase gone, everything normal. Except for one thing. The window was wide open, and the curtains were blowing inward from the wind outside, which didn't make sense because the window was on the 2nd floor. I figured maybe she left. People sometimes do weird things when traveling. But when I went back to the desk, I checked the cameras to see when she walked out. She never did. I rewound the footage all the way back to when she first arrived. You could clearly see her walk up to the door. But after that, nothing. No footage of her leaving the hallway, no footage of her exiting the building, and the camera pointed at room 6's hallway never once showed that door opening again. I ended up checking the entire lodge, every room, every stairwell, but there was nothing. The next morning, I told the owner. He looked at the footage and just got really quiet. Then he asked me something strange. Did she say her name was Emily? When I said yes, he went into the office and came back with an old newspaper clipping. It was about a woman who had gone missing in the mountains near the lodge 8 years earlier. Her name was Emily, and the article said the last place she had been seen was our lodge in room 6. To this day, whenever I work night shift somewhere, I hate answering hotel room phones. This happened during a winter trip with two of my friends about 4 years ago. We rented a remote hunting lodge in the mountains for a weekend. The place was way out in the woods, about a 40-minute drive from the nearest town. It looked amazing online. Big log cabin, huge porch, fireplace, everything. When we arrived Friday evening, it was already getting dark. The owner had told us the key would be in a lockbox on the porch. We unlocked the door and walked in. Right away, something felt off. The cabin was warm, like someone had been running the heater recently. But the owner said nobody had been there in weeks. At first, we thought maybe it was just insulation or something. Then my friend Jake pointed something out. There were muddy footprints on the wooden floor. Not a lot, just a few leading from the back door toward the living room. We assumed the cleaner must have left them. Still, it was a little weird. We unpacked our stuff and started a fire in the fireplace. About an hour later, we were all sitting around talking when we heard something upstairs. A creak, like a floorboard. All three of us looked at each other. Jake laughed and said it was probably the house settling. But then we heard it again. And this time, it was definitely footsteps. Slow footsteps moving across the floor above us. Now the owner had told us nobody else had access to the cabin. No caretaker, no neighbours, just us. So we all went quiet and listened. The steps stopped. Then we heard what sounded like a door upstairs, slowly closing. At that point, Jake grabbed a flashlight and said we should check it out. The three of us walked up the stairs together. There were 4 bedrooms up there. All the doors were open, all empty, beds made, closets empty. We laughed it off, but honestly, none of us felt great about it. Around midnight, we all went to bed. I took the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall. I remember waking up sometime in the middle of the night because I heard something outside my door. A soft, dragging sound, like something being pulled across the floor. I sat up in bed and listened, but it stopped. Then I heard a single knock. Not on my door, but on the wall beside it. Just one knock. I opened the door and looked into the hallway, and it was empty. But the light at the end of the hall was on. I was almost positive we had turned all the lights off earlier. I checked Jake's room. He was asleep. My other friend, Mark, was asleep too. So I turned the light off and went back to bed. The next morning we were packing up when Mark asked something that made my stomach drop. He said, "Which one of you went outside last night?" Neither of us had. He pointed at the kitchen window. There were fresh footprints in the snow outside, leading from the woods to the back door, and then back into the woods again. Jake checked the back door, and it was unlocked. None of us remembered unlocking it. Before we left, Jake checked the shed behind the cabin, and inside there was an old sleeping bag, empty food cans, and a small pile of firewood, like someone had been living there, watching the cabin. The creepiest part, though, the sleeping bag was still warm.